Coming straight out of Ecamm. This is a jam with the Ecamm fam. Ecamm fam is the name of the jam. This is a jam with the Ecamm fam. Ecamm fam is the name of the jam. This is a jam with the Ecamm fam. This is a jam with the Ecamm fam. This is a jam with the Ecamm fam. Ecamm fam is the name of the jam.
Wait, stop the music. Hold it, stop the music.
Ladies and gentlemen.
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 Can I please have your attention?
Now showtime. Are you ready? Are you ready for start time?
Let's find out. Ready, let's go.
Hello everyone, happy Friday and welcome to Let's Learn Ecamm Live. Now, Doc was at NAB this week and is probably flying back as we speak, so you have me filling in for him today. And if you are new to Ecamm, welcome. Every Friday we go live at this time to take you through some of the basics of setting up your live production. And for those of you that don't know me, my name is Neil Farimond. I am one of the moderators here at Ecamm. You've probably seen me knocking around in the Facebook groups, answering some questions as well. And I also have my own YouTube channel talking about video production, audio, and tutorials on Ecamm. But enough about all that. Let's take a look at who is in the chat. Say a quick hello to a couple of people. Here is Doc, actually. I won't make you look bad, Doc. No problem. I'll do my best to be good there. Yeah, move your feet. Let's see who's in here. Hello, Andy. Thank you for joining today as ever. And yes, as Andy said, please put a Q in front of your question so I can find out what's going on. Right, those are some of the comments. Let's go into live demo mode. And if you're new to Ecamm, there's a couple of things that I do to start off with in the preferences. So let's go and click on the preferences. In Ecamm, it's Command, comma, and that's the same preferences for every application on the Mac. The first thing that I do is I just disable this show program window while in other apps. And all that means is that you will get an Ecamm pop-up window if you move away from Ecamm that shows you basically a preview of your live stream. I disable that by default because I don't want that popping up. But obviously, if you want to put that in another monitor and so on, then that is a great way of showing your production and things like that. The other thing that I change is if you go over to the video settings in your preferences, I actually change the default source mode to blank. By default, it's turned on the setting for camera. And that means that when you create a new scene, it's going to inherit the first camera that's connected to your Mac. So we get a few questions around this, like why is my Ecamm always showing me the default camera and I can't do anything with it? Well, it may be because you've got this set. So if you change it to blank, that will help you out a little bit. So let's talk about scenes and overlays. So in Ecamm, scenes are like slides in a presentation or scenes in a movie. They will contain things like text, graphics, overlays, visual representations of what you want to show in your live stream production. And overlays are all the components that actually go into your scene. So within your overlays, you can add things like cameras, text overlays, backgrounds, and stuff like that. So those are the differences between scenes and overlays. So let's create our first scene. And let's do that by hitting the plus button here on the scenes menu, and we'll do plus, and that will give us a blank scene. I'm also going to remove the program window overlay here, and you do that by hitting Command tilde. And hopefully you'll see the keyboard strokes come up here as well if you want to know what commands I'm using. So let's create a new scene, and I'm just going to add my camera as a new camera overlay, which is down here. So hit the new camera overlay, and we're going to change this to video source camera A. Now you might be saying, well, why do I select camera A and why don't I select my cam link or something like that? Well, I'm going to show you that camera switcher in Ecamm is your new best friend. And the reason for that is it allows you to map all your cameras to a specific letter instead of using the cam link name or things like that. So to get to the camera switcher, let's go to Window at the top and come down here and click on Camera Switcher. Now, your Ecamm setup is obviously going to be different than mine, but I wanted to show you how this is set up at the moment. So I have an abundance of cameras running at the moment. Yes, but anyway, and in the camera switcher, you'll see something called All Sources. So this is everything that your Mac is recognizing with regards to what is actually connected to it from a camera perspective. You can have guests. I've got my iPad Pro, video pencil camera, which is another thing, NDI cameras, things like that will all come into here. What I tend to do is I will go over to the AB tab, and that will allow me to map which camera input is represented by a specific letter. And this is so simple then for when you're building out scenes or wanting to change multiple scenes that are mapped to a specific camera letter. So for my main camera, which is on this DeckLink Quad HDMI input 2, is my main camera, camera A. The second one, which is a desk camera, is camera B, camera C, and so on. And you can also do the same thing for your guests. So when you're bringing your guests into Ecamm, you can map guest 1 to a particular letter and so on. So it simplifies the process of having to think, well, is my cam link plugged in here? And as you know, if you are using cam links, they are not persistent with regards to how they are configured with your camera. So you'll restart your Mac, for example, and then the next day your cam link may not be appearing with the right camera source. And that's nothing to do with Ecamm, that's just the way that the Apple system works, and the mapping of those USB ports is different every time you restart your Mac. So it's really handy to have these mappings with your camera switcher set to a particular letter. So as I mentioned, we can click on the little pen tool here, and that will show us which is the video source. So it's video source A. So I'm going to just create a couple of things with some text overlays and so on to make this look a bit more fancy. I'm going to zoom out using my mouse wheel to zoom out a little bit of the camera. So I'll just put it to about here. And you'll notice as I'm moving the camera overlay around, you will see that we have some guides that snap to the respective position of your scene. So I am streaming right now in a 16:9 format and at 1080p or whatever, but the camera is set to the same aspect ratio. So I'll click on that and you'll see the shape of my camera is wide 16:9. I can change that shape, and if I do, I can change it to a circle if I wanted. I can change it to a square. But I'm just going to keep it to wide 16:9 for the purposes of this demo and snapped to the center for both. If you click on the pen tool, you've got a few options as well. You can add a border around this to make it look a little bit more fancy, which is what I'm going to do now. You can add a color, a gradient, or motion. I'll just add a simple color overlay for now. And I'm just going to make it, in fact, I'll just leave it white for the purposes of this demo. You can control the width of the border as well. Currently it's on 8. You can make it larger or smaller, whatever you fancy. I'm just going to leave it at 10 for the purposes of this. And you can also make the corners rounded and so on. So I'll just make the corners a little bit rounded like that. Now, this looks pretty bland. I'm going to put a background in there. You can bring in images and overlays into this, but I'm just going to create a simple rectangle overlay, which is a shape. So if you click on this down here, it's called New Shape Overlay. Click on this and, oh, look at what's happened. So my shape overlay is sitting above my camera. And that's because Ecamm works in the same principle as Photoshop and other things, layers. So anything that sits on the top will appear at the top. Anything at the bottom is at the bottom. So I'm just going to click and drag my rectangle over and pop it under the camera. So now I sit here. You may also be noticing that there is some motion going on in this rectangle, and I'm controlling that by adding a specific fill. So you can see here the fill is set to motion, and it's basically two colors. So a light blue and a sort of a darker blue, and that motion is just sort of swirling around the rectangle overlay, and you can see that it's adding a little bit of nice motion in there. If you were here last week, Martin McKenna took you through a really simplistic but amazing way of getting all your overlays in a nice structured order, and he built up these scenes from scratch. So catch Martin's replay from last week if you want to know more about sort of design within these scenes. I'm not a designer, as you can tell, so I'm just going to show you through some of the basics of how we set all this stuff up. So there's me in the camera. How much fun. And now I'm going to add a sort of a text overlay with the graphics to show you how I can bring in text as well. So down here at the bottom, I'll just hit the plus. I'm going to hit new text overlay, and I'm just going to put my name in there. And if I hit option return, I can put, well, what I do, I'm just going to put video guy. Let's do that. I will then change the color and size of this text. So I'm going to make this text here 36, something like that. And I'm going to change the color to this maroon color here. Let's add that. Oh, look at the size of that. So I'm going to zoom out here and make this a bit smaller. I'm just going to pop it here like that. And as you can see, Ecamm will also snap to the thirds within the screen and quarters, I think, as well. So it's really handy for just being able to snap where you want that to look. I'm also just going to change the padding a little bit on that. So the text margin, I'll just zoom this a little bit, and then I will make the text a little bit bigger. Zoom in there. Whoops. Let's do it like that for now. Okay. Now you can, as I mentioned, you can also bring in graphics and lots of other things. So in my little demo assets here, let's just double click on that, bring in some demo assets. I've got some images, and I will just bring in one of these funny images that I've got here. So this is me as a circle. You can just click and drag it straight into your production. Look at that. Lovely looking gentleman there. Caricature that I made. And I'm just going to zoom that out a little bit. And I'm just going to pop it on the edge here. I'm not going to be too specific about this. In fact, I'll just make that a little bit bigger. And I'll just pop that on the edge there. So yeah, it looks funny, pretty cool. Now, what Martin showed you yesterday was that I want to group all these. So if I'm actually moving this text overlay around with the graphic, I don't want to have to do them individually. So let's put them all in a folder. So if I go down here to the bottom, it's a group actually, but it's a folder effectively of all your assets. So I'll just click on new group, and I'll just call this host. And within that, I'm now going to be able to put my guest graphic. I'm going to put my name. I'm just clicking and dragging them and put them in there. Whoops, put them in there. And I don't need to put my camera in there for now. I'll just put the nameplate and the little graphic. And we can do this little funky thing here called link overlay group. So when I click on this link, that means when I move one of these things, everything moves together. I'm linking the assets together to make it easy to move these around. So I'm just going to pop that there like that. And that is a really sort of a simple, easy way of linking all this stuff together. To unlink it, you just click on it again, because I just want to move this and make it a little bit smaller so it's not overpowering. So that's a quick and easy way of creating these little overlays with text and so on. I'm just going to pause, come out of live demo mode. I'm going to see if there's any questions. And actually, one thing I did want to show you with the power of Ecamm, I don't know if there's any questions, because everybody should be putting a Q in front of their question, right, kids? So I'm going to search for that in this search box here. Now, power of Ecamm is you can actually search for letters, phrases, words, anything you want. So I'm just going to put Q, colon, and that's going to show me all the questions that have come up. So Andy, blah, 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 blah. Look at that. No questions at the moment. We're doing marvelously well. So no questions at this time, but you can see that just by putting a Q in there, you can actually search for questions and phrases. All right, so you've got your first host scene set up, and I'm going to rename this scene up here and call it host, because that would be pretty useful. All right, now I'm going to create a second scene, and I'm going to create it with a fictitious guest. So I'm going to duplicate this scene to make things a bit easier for myself. And to duplicate a scene, you come down here. Whoops, where's my mouse gone? There it is. So this little double box here is duplicate current scene. So I'm going to do that. And I'm going to call this, because it's always good to name your scenes so you don't get lost, host and guest. I don't have a guest coming on today, but I'm just going to create a placeholder for a guest and show you how I can crop and duplicate and things like that. So you can see here that this is still linked together. I'm going to use the Option key and crop in my video. And you can do this with any overlay. And I'm cropping it in because I'm making space for my guest that's going to come on. But not really. So I'll move it over here, make it snap to the edge. Now this, when you see the guide wire across the entire scene, these are your safeguards, which means that basically, if you're streaming and so on, then your video will be right within those particular areas and it won't spill over and, well, it looks silly. So let me just put this here. Now, because I've got everything together, I'm now going to grab my camera and also pop this into the group, and you'll see why in a minute. Everything is linked together, so now if I move everything, the entire camera, overlay and graphic all move together. Really simple, very easy. I'm going to now duplicate this entire scene, and I'm going to do that by hitting the Option key and clicking and dragging across. And this is the same in Mac Speak, so you can just basically, there you go, click and drag. Now I'm going to change this a bit. Nobody wants to see two of me. Now typically when you've got a guest coming on, it's nice to maybe have a photograph of who that guest is. So I'm going to just pop this here into my camera and tell you that I'm going to set this to guest 1. So I'm just going to have guest 1. It's blank, looks a bit boring. So if a guest disappears, and Doc has mentioned this before, and it's a great tip, that if your guest disappears, you can have a placeholder here of your guest just in case. So I'm going to change this up a little bit. I'm going to unlink down here at the bottom. And I'm also going to rename this as guest. So I know that what I'm playing with right now down here is actually the guest and not my host scene, host overlay. So I'm going to sort of unlink this, and I'm going to replace this asset with another one. And the beauty of Ecamm is if you click on this little pen tool, click on that, I can replace assets. So now I'm going to find the asset wherever that is. I'm going to go to my desktop. I'm going to grab my demo assets into images, and I'm going to grab Martini Circle. And those of you that see me before, Martini is one of my cats. We have 7, don't ask. I'm going to change this to be the name. Call it Martini, M-I-R-T-I-N-A, and she is hungry, always. So I'll leave it at that. There you go. So there's Martini. And I want to put a graphic in here now that's a placeholder for the guest. So let's go back to demo assets. Let's grab an image. And this is going to be a placeholder. You can see just by hitting the space bar, I get a preview. She's looking super happy there. There is a story behind this picture. But anyway, I'm going to grab this and pop it in. And I'm going to just zoom out a little bit and position this by doing the crop option at the bottom, if it'll let me. I'm just going to crop this up like that. And because Martini is sitting at the top, I want her picture to be basically below the guest camera because that's transparent at the moment. So now you can see she's sitting behind the camera overlay. And as you can see, it looks pretty good. You're going to get this white line because it's just the placeholder for the guest camera when the guest comes in. But actually, it might be better if I just moved it above the camera and it looks a bit better like that. Anyway, you get the idea that you can have this placeholder. I'm not happy with that. I might just put it, no, I have to put it there. Okay, we should leave it there. So now I've got my host and guest next to each other. Actually, let me just link all this together here, including the image, and I'm just going to position it because I've noticed it's not in exactly the same position. There we go. So now they are both centered. I'll just come into live demo mode so you can see. And look at that. How beautiful. Myself and my cat waiting to take questions from you lovely people. All right, so there's a number of other things that you can do to bring in assets into your scene. And as I've mentioned, there's quite a few different things. We've talked about image overlays. I'm just looking at my list. So let's talk about animated overlays, web widgets, and fun things like that. So let me create a new scene. And I'm just going to call this web. Right, so there's a number of different ways of bringing in web content. You can do a share of a Chrome browser, and here's one I prepared earlier. So there's your Ecamm Leap into Live, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And this is just a screen share of Chrome. I'll show you how to do that in a second, but I'm going to actually create a web widget to start with. And the web widget is down here in this little globe, and it's called a widget. I need to go, first of all, and find my links, which are here. I'm going to grab one of these links. Let's go and look at Create Ecamm. So click on this, copy, 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 copy. And I'll create a web widget by clicking the web widget button, and it's going to come up with this. Let me just grab all this out of here. And we can name it Ecamm. Oops, if I could spell. All right, so here's the web widget URL. So that's the one we've just copied. I'm going to leave the web options here to 720 by 1280 by 720. Frame rate doesn't really matter. I'll just leave it at 15. And we'll put in high resolution mode and keep running. And what keep running means is that it's going to persistently go out and query the website. So if there's any changes, it will come in. Now the web widget, I'll just click on this and add it here. Take a second. So the web widget is effectively a browser. Now it's not the same browser as Chrome. So if you have a website that you're actually showing that has some sort of credentials that needs to be entered, it's not going to persistently keep those credentials when you go back to the scene. So think of it as a browser without sort of cookies or JavaScript and things like that. And for the most part, it serves a purpose and works really well. So this is our web widget, and I'll show you what these little things do in a second down here. I'm just going to put a little image in the background. So let's just pick a background. Let's pick this one. I'm just going to click and drag this into here and move it down because one is on top of the other. If you don't want the scroll bar, you can crop that out, but I'll draw your attention to the buttons at the bottom. So on the left-hand side, oops, where's it gone? On the left-hand side, the little hand or the finger pointing here means that you can, in this position, you can move the web widget around just like any asset that you bring into your scene or every overlay that you bring into your scene. I'm just going to make it a bit bigger. I'm going to snap it into place. And once you're happy, you can then toggle this over to the right-hand side. Now it's toggled to the right, and now it acts as a browser, which means I can scroll in my scene, I can click around, I can talk about Create Ecamm, 11 days, 19 hours, 35 minutes to tickets, people. Be sure to get them. And then you can play videos in there. I'm not going to do that right now, and so on. So you can see that it's an actual browser, and it's really cool. So for showing content in the browser and so on, you can simply just play around with it and do that. So that's one way of bringing in a web widget. If I just now want to create a screen share, which I will do, I will click the plus button and I'll call this screen share. And the screen share function in Ecamm allows you to do exactly that. You can bring in a share of any screen that you've got on any monitor. Now I've got 3 monitors here, so this is going to get super confusing real quick. I'm just going to put my face as a camera overlay real quick. Remember, I'm going to pick camera A. And if you notice, the border color, the border width, and the rounded corners are persistent, i.e. they will be remembered based on your last choice when you set up your camera overlay. I'm going to make this a circle. Let's pop it here. do all this, zoom out. I'm just going to pop me there at the bottom. So if I was presenting something, I'd now create a screen share of something. So down at the bottom here, we're going to hit the, where's it gone? Come on now, you can't find it. Oh yeah, it's the little computer icon, which is the new screen share overlay. Let's click on this. And by default, it's going to pick, I don't know, something. So let's do this primary display and let's pick the Google Chrome. And I've just basically got a Chrome browser running here. I've got Create Ecamm here, Leap into Live, but as you can see, it's a bit small at the moment. So I'm going to get rid of the border and the corner width. And I'm going to make this larger by zooming in. Now, it's not going to fit exactly straight away because it's using, if you notice on the little button here, it's using the primary display aspect ratio. You could actually change it to the second display, depending what monitors you've got, of course. They could be different resolutions, different sizes. That's why it's showing you that. So if I click on the little option key, I'm going to drag the screen share in here just to make it neater. Obviously, if you change the size of your screen share, which you'll see here, it's going to affect the cropping that you've already done. So it's always good to keep your screen share the same size or the size that you want. Don't touch it. And then you can do this cropping in. Oh, Chrome has disappeared. What happened to Chrome? Uh-oh. I don't know what happened there, but Chrome just decided to disappear. So thanks, Chrome. Why is it doing that? Chrome is disappearing. Let me just get rid of this. There's probably a key command I've done there with Chrome. What is happening? All right. I will leave it at that then for now. Chrome is not happy when I'm doing this. That's better. Gremlins in the system. What can I say? All right. So now I've basically made this the size that I want. And you can see it's going to snap when I move it. Come on, snap. There you go. And put that in the center. Again, screen share is above the camera. So I'm going to move the camera. Put it to the bottom, and there you go. So that's a great way of sharing your screen. And I'll just put in another background. Let's bring in this one because I quite like that one. Midjourney, don't you just love it? There you go. So another screen share. So now when I go over to my screen, I'm actually controlling the Chrome browser on my other monitor. I can click through tabs and so on. All right, so that is screen share overlays in a nutshell, and you can basically screen share anything that you want, a presentation, keynote, PowerPoint, heaven forbid, things like that. Let's just go to the main camera and let me check on if there are any questions. Maybe there's not. I'm using Q. No, Doc, you should know this. It does not work on an iPad. But you can share your iPad screen, of course. All right. Yes, thanks, Andy. Always use Q for questions. I liked your Instagram post recently, Andy, as well, showing that people should be using Q for their questions. All right, let's go back to live demo mode then. Let's talk about the differences between videos and what happens when you bring a video in with sound and so on. So videos are treated slightly differently depending on how you bring them in. So let's create a new scene. I'm going to call this video. And I have some videos down here. So you have a couple of options. If I was to bring in a video that I did not create earlier, which is the flow with the lovely Katie and Doc. If I just drag this straight into my Ecamm scene.
Aloha, Flow Riders, and welcome to another edition of
And I will just move that out of the way just a second. So you get the impression that when you bring in the video, that's all you can do with it. So I'm going to go back to this. I'm going to play it full screen. You can't adjust it or do anything. So I'll create another one. and watch what happens here. So if I get the same video, and I now put it into my overlays down at the bottom, I'm dragging it in, Ecamm is going to pop up with a question. And the question is, do you want me to add this as an animated overlay or play full screen with audio? If it is a MP4 or a movie file and you add it as an animated overlay, you get the option now, obviously, to move this around. I can stop and start this, but there is no sound. And the reason why that is, animated overlays are not going to play sound. So if you want to bring in a video that you can add your rounded corners, you can change your border, you can do all these things, and I'll just change the color so you can see it on this dark background, then obviously you can do that. But unfortunately, it won't play sound. So the way that you get around this is you convert the video file into something called a WebM format. And there's a free application called Shutter Encoder. And Shutter Encoder will allow you to convert any video file into the WebM format. So I'm just going to go down here to the trash and delete this video. And here's one I created earlier in the WebM folders. And it's always good to have all your assets in a folder structure. It makes it so much easier when you're hunting around and trying to find this stuff. So here is now the Flow podcast in a WebM format. And when I drag this into my overlays, you can hear the sound. I can move it around. I'm just going to pause it. And I can obviously do the borders and all that kind of good stuff. So you get the idea that I can actually change and manipulate and do what I want with this particular video because it's now in a WebM format. You can resize it, create multiple videos and so on and things like that. So that is how you would bring in a video with sound and you wanted to change it in terms of the sizing, positioning and adding a border. Now that's not to say that you can obviously bring in a full screen video if that's what you want, but just remember that you can't do anything with that scene once you brought in your video. So always create sort of separate scenes and then add the respective videos to it as well. All right, so let me have a quick look to see. Let me get rid of the questions. Anything coming in down here? Yes, and as Paul's mentioned, Doc did a great video here on the Shutter Encoder and how to create WebM formats to that. And the Shutter Encoder is here as well. And it's a great application. Wonderful indeed. So thanks, Paul, for sharing those links. So you'll notice that my comments are coming in with a color that I've added and the font. And that is a overlay for comments specifically added to Ecamm. So if you go into overlays, you can go into here and you can add a placeholder comment overlay. Now that is a great way of editing and setting how you want your overlays to look prior to any comments coming in. So I'm just going to make the icon bigger and I'm going to edit this. It's going to disappear in a minute. I'm going to change the color to, I don't know, something bright like that. And I'm going to change the text to electrolyze and do save. So let me just, the reason why that has gone and I can't edit it is because there is a timer on the comments in your preferences. So let's change that so I can actually go and edit it. If we go into preferences, let's go into general, and down here you'll see that there is a setting that says automatically hide comments after 20 seconds. I'm going to uncheck that for a second because I need to add a comment overlay first. So let's go to overlays, add placeholder comment overlay. I'm going to click on this and it did save the changes, but I do want to make a few more changes like that and just make this a bit bigger. That's okay. And you can put your comments wherever you want. You can actually put them at the side, blah, 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 like this. So when people bring in their comments, that's a bit large. As I said, oops, there you go. Leave it at that. So now, if I bring in, if I just remove this comment, I just replace it with Paul's comment, as you can see now, Paul's comment will come in the styling that I have just set. So it's a great way of setting your comments ready for when you're going live, so your production looks how you want it with your own branding and things like that. Okay. Let's talk about the auto switcher, which is this thing down here, which is a timer. I'll talk about countdown timers in a second. In fact, let's just do that now. Let's do a countdown timer first of all. So you may have noticed when we go to the Chrome share here that in Create Ecamm, we've got a countdown, 11 days, 19 hours to Create Ecamm. So I'm going to create a similar countdown timer. I've got to get my thing set up here. So let's go and just add this countdown timer to this scene. So down here, you will see a little timer set there, which is your countdown overlay. Click on that. And at the moment, it's set for 10 minutes. And there's a couple of options here. You've got the ability to auto start your timer as soon as you switch to that particular scene. And you've got a couple of different types. So the type is countdown for a specific amount of time, countdown to a time every day, or countdown to a specific date and time. That's what I'm going to set. So I'm going to set this countdown timer so it counts down the same as the one on the Ecamm website to Create Ecamm. How do we do that? So we change this here, and from memory, not memory at all, I've got it written down. It's the 1st of May, and it is at 1500 my time is when tickets go on sale. So let me just find out why I can't do that. Can I just go back? There we go. Oops. Come on. That's 1500. And there you go. So let's add that. I think that's correct. 1st of May, 1500. Yeah. So if I do this, and let's just see if it's correct. So let's just bring in a quick screen share overlay. And let's see what that looks like. Is that the same? Is it counting down? 11, 19, 22, 35. There you go. So tickets go on sale. And that's just the simple way of creating a little sort of countdown timer to a specific time and date. So you could put text on there and say Create Ecamm starts here and so on. So that is the countdown for Create Ecamm. Let me just get rid of that. In fact, I'll just hide it. To hide any overlay in your scene, you can just click the little I button here, and that will actually hide the overlay for you. So you can do hidden countdown timers if you don't want to see a countdown timer on your scene, but you want the countdown timer to go to the next scene after a selected period of time. You can actually hide it, and it will still work in the background and so on. As you can see, if I just unhide it, it's still there. Amazing. All right. I was going to mention, what was the other thing I was going to mention? Oh yeah, the auto scene switcher. So let's first of all create a group down here and click on this. And I'm just going to put it all the way to the bottom. So it's just out the way. And I'm just going to call this auto cam in this particular case. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the 3 cameras switch automatically within this group. And actually, I've created the wrong thing. It's not a group. I actually need to create the auto switch, the new automatic group, not a static group. So apologies. It has the one with a little clock face on it and a little play button. So there's nothing in here at the moment. So I'm just going to create a couple of camera overlays. Let's create... In fact, I'll just copy this scene. It's easier. So I'm just going to duplicate my scene, do that. I'm just going to drag that into here. Okay. And then I'm just going to duplicate this scene. And I'm going to switch to it. It's exactly the same right now. And I'm going to change camera. I'm going to change it to camera B, which is going to be this camera over here. Go back to that one. I'll name this one host. Oops. Host. This is desk camera. And then do one more duplication of the scene. And I'm just going to call this BTS, behind the scenes camera. And this behind the scenes camera is going to be camera C. So there you go. 3 cameras. Hello. So desk camera, behind the scenes, host camera. So what you can do is you can get Ecamm to automatically switch between scenes using this automatic group. And you can actually name the automatic group as well. I'm just going to call it Cam Auto for now. And in the little gear button, it gives you a couple of options. Let's click on it. So you can ask it to advance to the next scene or do a random scene. Let's do random. And we want it to be either in a fixed time interval or a random time range. So the random time range is this. So I'll just set it there. And I want it to between 3 seconds and 5 seconds, just for fun. And then you can select which transition you want. By default, it's cross dissolve. There's a ton of ones here. I'm just going to leave it at that for now. And then if you wanted to have your cameras operate like you've got a camera switcher running in the background, you can actually do this with Ecamm. All I'm going to do now is press the play button, and I'm just going to sit here, go out of live demo mode, and it's going to randomly switch between all the different cameras that I've just selected at random intervals. You can make these intervals whatever you want, or you can make them fixed. So it just gives a little bit more dynamic, I guess, to your live stream, so where you can sort of see different cameras. And these don't have to be cameras. These can be scenes. These can be anything that you want. It's entirely up to you. Anything that you put in the automatic scene switcher, it will switch between. So it's a great, cool little feature to be able to switch between scenes without having a camera operator working on your live production. All right, let's see if there's any comments here. Let's double check. Should be some music in the background. Don't seem to be any questions at the moment. Andy says, I used Folder for a conference. I was recording a couple of months, so I could have it switch between cameras at random. I was doing some other things as well. Yeah, I mean, it's so handy. If you've got multiple cameras and multiple scenes, then what a great way of being able to basically switch these around. Mark is asking, was there a maximum amount of characters in the YouTube chat for you just now? 200, I think, isn't it? 200 characters in YouTube. If that's what you're talking about, it might not be as well. Let's just quickly take a look at interview mode. Interview mode is a very powerful feature of Ecamm, and it's on the pro version only, but if you get a trial, you can trial it 14 days and test it out. So interview mode, let's go into window, interview, which is there. Okay. So in interview mode, you've got a couple of things. So first of all, this is the camera that your host is going to see, your guest is going to see when they first join. You can change this to any camera that you want. And down at the gear here is a couple of options for setting up your interview mode. And I'll show you the other preferences. First off, you can disable it on and off. I've left mine on. And let's click on this button here. And what you get now is a bunch of options. So you can give your page a title, and this is the page that the guests will see when they get the URL in the Chrome browser. Then they will obviously see what title it is respective to your branding. You can add different logos depending if you've got dark mode or light mode set up for the background. I always turn mine to dark mode specifically. And you can add different graphics and images here. You've got a guest link domain. So by default, it's guest.ecamm.live. You can do a URL redirect if you wanted, but there's a ton of other options here as well for you. Default to dark mode is what I've got set. And these are what the guests options are going to be. So you can have the guests actually view all the viewer comments, so you can disable that. You can allow private chat between you and your guests, so you can have a background chat going on as well if you want to give your guests directions and things like that, or just to talk about questions that are coming up. And then you can also show the overall viewer count, i.e. how many viewers are tuning into your live stream is going to be shown to your guest within the browser. The main one I want to draw your attention to is this, which is turn off audio processing for guests. So by default, this is not checked, and that means that Ecamm will do some form of echo cancellation and some processing on the guest's audio to reduce any slapback or feedback that the guest may be hearing if they're not wearing headphones or don't have a decent setup and things like that. If you're sure that your guest has got headphones, microphone, and want to turn off all processing, then you would check this box. You can do this if a guest has joined and check this on and off, but the guest would have to leave and then rejoin. So it's not where it's completely fixed, even if you are live, but you can have to get the guest to sort of rejoin if you wanted to change this particular setting. There is also some preferences within Ecamm for interview. So let's go and hit Command, comma. And in the interview mode here, if I go over to here, you've got a couple of options as well. So when a guest joins, you've got the option to play the ring chime. You may have heard it on some streams before. You've got the option to auto answer guests. I would tend not to do this. They can be placed into the sort of a green room, which you can send them here. And the green room means that they won't be added to the broadcast. They're actually on mute by default, which is great because if you're in the middle of something, a guest comes in, you don't necessarily want them to be on the show straight away. You can also lower the music when in off-air audio mode. And off-air audio mode means that there is a back channel chat, an actual audio chat, for example. So in the countdown timer, everything is muted apart from the system audio when I'm going live, for example. And if I have guests on, they can actually talk and hear each other without it being broadcast to the main live stream. And all this setting is doing here is reducing any music that might be playing for the guests and yourself so you can hear each other a bit better as well. Another important one, and we get a couple of questions for, is why can't my guest see the broadcast? You may have got your guest view set to host camera. And all that means is when the guest joins, they will just be seeing whatever camera you've got set up here. And that's the only thing they will see. If you switch scenes, share things on your Ecamm production, screen shares and stuff like that, if it is set to guest view, if the guest view is set to host camera only, they won't see your Ecamm production. So that might be one of the issues that we've seen before. If you want your guest to see the entire production, and why wouldn't you, then you would set that to broadcast. One thing that is a little bit disconcerting with guests is that when a guest comes on to your live stream, there is always going to be some latency, a little bit of delay between them speaking and them seeing themselves. And it might be quite distracting, them seeing themselves actually in the Ecamm production, particularly if you've got a scenario like this where we have, host and guest. The guest may not want to see themselves. So that is why you potentially would set the guest view to just look at the host camera. And then it's like them having a conversation, a one-to-one type of view that might be more appealing for guests who are used to just being on like a Zoom call or something like that, where they're just seeing almost like a conversation. So again, it's a personal preference. It's something that you should talk about with your guests before they come on, but at least you have the option to actually add that down there. All right. And a really good point, Paul, and I'm just going to make these comments look down here. Dark mode will reduce the light from your monitor and then reflect it on your face. Yes, everything that I'm doing is typically in dark mode. And if you've got the Elgato prompter, I know we're slightly off topic, but it is quite important. If you've got an Elgato monitor and you're in light mode and the guest is using that, you may get some flare, some light flare coming from the actual screen on the prompter that then will be seen by your camera, and it's like a little misty glow. It's not like a Pro Mist filter. Those are dedicated for a particular purpose. This is actually glare from the white screen. So yeah, put everything in dark mode. It's going to help you with that. Okay, so a question we have as well is what happens if I want to share my profile with somebody? So a little bit of housekeeping. Ecamm has the ability to export profiles to share with your friends, colleagues, co-producers, remote producers, whatever it might be. And profiles are basically all the settings, not every setting, but most of the settings within your Ecamm production that is saved within something called a profile. If you click up here, I've got quite a few different profiles. They're all grayed out at the moment because we're actually live, but you can create a separate profile for your separate show. You don't always have to use the same Ecamm profile because obviously if you've got multiple scenes for different shows, it might get confusing and your profile might get quite large. So things can get saved in the profile that can also make it quite big. So what I would recommend is if you've got different shows, for different particular workflows, then create yourself a new profile and dedicate that profile to that particular show. But you can absolutely share profiles, and even if you've got a Mac of your own that you want to take on a trip and you're traveling with it and you've got Ecamm loaded on there and you want to bring all your production to that laptop, then you can certainly just export your profile and then load it up onto your laptop. And to export a profile, it's really simple. Just go into Profile, Export Current Profile, give it a destination. I'm just going to pop it onto my desktop and then click Export. And once it's exported, it's just a simple one file. And to get that profile loaded into your production person's Ecamm setup, just double click and it will instantly load the profile up. Now, you don't always as well have to actually export the entire profile. If you are creating a scene for your colleague, like we do at Creative Amplifiers, I'll basically create a scene for my colleague and then I'll just send him the scene. You can actually just click and drag scenes out of Ecamm and put them on your desktop. So I'm just going to grab this host and guest scene and just pop it right there. So now the parameters, the settings for that particular scene, the overlays and all that good stuff is stored within this particular scene. So now I can just send this to my colleague, email it to them, whatever, put it on Google Drive, they double click on it and the scene gets automatically loaded and it sits at the bottom within your Ecamm profile. So again, another great way of housekeeping, keeping everything in order, exporting and saving particular scenes and stuff like that. So it's really handy and I use it all the time. Let me just look in my list and just checking the time. We're nearly at the top of the hour. La 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 la. Okay, just one other quick thing is about music. I'm just going to quickly check if there's any questions. Okay, no questions. Okay. All right. That's great. So let me show you about music and how music is sort of used, in my view, anyway, when I'm doing my productions. I'm just going to delete that. So just like any other asset, let's just get rid of the interview. Music is an overlay. And let's just bring in some music here. So I'm just going to make sure this sound effects is low on here. I don't want it to come in there. So the sound effects panel, if I go to here, Window, Sound Effects. So your sound effects is basically all your music assets, and they are all going to sit in here. You heard the Ecamm Fam Jam before, which I'm playing now. I'm just going to pause that. And then there's other music and so on. I'm just going to bring in some copyright-free lo-fi music. Don't worry, it's copyright-free. I'll just play that. You'll hear this playing on my stuff. So you bring the music into your sound effects, and now you can add those sound effects to your scene. So if you want some gentle, relaxing, chill-out music playing as you're doing your scenes, which I typically do, I will click on the gear menu down here, and I will add to current scene. You've also got a volume level here. It's not a gain level, it's just an output volume level. And I'm just going to set this to 44, add it to scene. And if I bring back all my controls, you'll see that the lo-fi music is now playing gently in the background. I'm going to just reduce the volume here a second. You've got a couple of options. When I switch to a new scene, which is, let's say, I'm going to move this one up here, host and guest, the music stops straight away. And the reason why it stops is because I've got this checkbox here added to it, and it says stop when scene ends. If I uncheck that and I go to the host and guest, it will keep playing. For every scene that I switch to, it will keep playing. So that's one way of getting your music to play at the same volume level across all your respective scenes. But what if I wanted the music to play louder on a, let's say I've got a Be Right Back screen. So here's one. Sorry, let me just switch this off a sec here first. I'm going to stop when the music ends. Okay. Stop music when scene, sorry. So let's go to Be Right Back. main camera. Can you hear the music? It's quieter because I've got the independent volume level set now. So I'm going to set this really low so it's barely audible. And now something's gone wrong. I go to my be right back scene. Within your respective scenes. And that's what I do. So I've got all the music set to the respective scenes. If the scenes are all going to be the same volume, I'll just let it play through. And then if there's a specific scene where I want the volume louder, that's how I do it. I add the music again to that specific scene and then change the volume level. So it's a great way of just adding a little bit of background music. And again, not having a mixer or anybody having to do the levels for you. You can do that yourself. And, well, Ecamm can do it for you as well. Let me just scroll down here. Andy has to leave. Okay, no more questions. Let me just have one last look through my list of wonderful stuff. I think I've almost covered everything. Just one last thing in the preferences is about recording. So in Ecamm, you have the ability to record something called isolated video and audio. And that means that you can independently record all the, I say all, that's not strictly true. You can record up to 3 video sources. If you've got 3 video sources, as I have, 3 cameras independently within your Ecamm production. So you don't have to be switching to those scenes for it to record. It's going to record them in the background for you. And you have the option to select which mic that you want the audio to be recorded with those respective cameras. So great for multicam editing if you want to bring those cameras in separately later into your editing tool of choice and edit those into a multicam edit. You can also basically, what's the word I'm looking for? Record, your interview guests as isolated video. And I think it will record up to 10 guests. Correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, in the interview mode here. So that's the maximum number of guests that you can have on a pro version on your M series Mac. And it will record basically all those guests as separate files as well. And also record your isolated audio tracks. I'm actually live at the moment, so it's not doing that. So there's lots of other great options that you can have, especially if you want to record these isolated video tracks and audio. But just a word of caution, just keep in mind the specifications of your Mac and what you're actually asking it to do. With live streaming, you're doing encoding. I'm always recording the broadcast. It's sending your feed out. If you've got guests, you also are bringing those guests in, processing their audio and video. You're sending out separate feeds to each of your guests from your machine. And if you're asking it then to basically record all your guests, all your cameras as well, you need to have a speedy, beefy machine to do that. And lots of people here have done various tests with that as well. But just a word of caution, I do see questions coming in sometimes, oh, my Mac's sort of stopped recording or whatever it might be and it can't handle that. Well, that's because you may be overloading it with things. And also the resolution, what you're streaming at, also has an impact on that. So guests always come in at 720p, just to keep that in mind. They're not going to come in at 4K. And then whatever you got your camera set to, Ecamm's going to record that as well. And obviously your streaming size, frame rate, and all that good stuff does make a difference to what you are doing. All right. Oh, thank you, Paul. So yes, 10 guests with Ecamm Pro on a M-based Series Mac. Okay. Right. Well, not sure I understand that question. Oh, a Mac. Oh, I see. Maybe that was a joke. It's a bit late in the day for me and I've been out in the sunshine all day, so who knows. Right, so a couple of quick things going on, a little bit of announcements and stuff. As I mentioned, let's go to the Ecamm Chrome window if this is still working, if I've not messed around with it. Tickets go on sale for Creator Camp in 11 days. I will be there. I'm planning to be there. I am really beefy. I'm really looking forward to catching up with everybody again. Next week, Leap into Live. Do not forget about Leap into Live tools and tactics. You've got an abundance of amazing people that's going to be speaking at the event. It's free and you can register now at the link that Paul has just put out, leap.ecamm.com. So a ton of good stuff coming up there. Let me switch to my main scene so you can see that as well. Right, so let me go back to the main camera. I'm going to check one last time for questions. Oh, my music's playing. How sweet. I'll just pause that for a sec. All right, if there are no other questions, this has been super fun. I do appreciate you all sticking around. Thank you again for joining this evening, and I will see you around on videos and so on. And there's some big announcements coming up next week, as you've heard. So stay tuned to the Ecamm channel. Make sure you subscribe and like and all that good stuff to get all those notifications. And I'll say good night. Thank you for joining, and I will see you sometime soon. Take it easy, and thanks again.
Coming straight out of Ecamm. This is a town with the Ecamm found.